So nice to have so many people here. I see so far we've got 76 attendees. That's fabulous. We're going to have a great meeting today. We have Senator Brown, who's going to be our keynote speaker today. And as normal, after the ringing the bell, we're going to have reflection by Butch Kruger and the pledge by Kirk Church.
Then let us pray. As we anticipate this holy week, Lord, fill our hearts with the joy of thy salvation, even in the midst of the concern we all have regarding the pandemic of COVID-19. We pray for those afflicted and pray for healing in our nation and in our world. In thy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Uh-oh, I've just forgotten. This is horrible. I practiced earlier. This is just like what I did on the radio. Pledge allegiance to the United States. All right. Horrible. Forget about it. Now I need it.
No problem. We can all do it together and help you out. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America.
To the republic stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all. Talk about stage fright. Holy smoke.
The bigger the challenge, but we got through it. Butch, Kirk, thank you very much for the reflection and the pledge. Delventhal in the group. Brad, are you here? You are. Rudolph Libby Group. You guys are kind enough to be our meeting sponsor for the month, and thank you very much. We have invited, his name is Randy Rothenbuehler. He works at Churchill's. I think he's one of the high muckety-mucks there. And he's going to speak for a couple of minutes about what's going on in food distribution in his business. I know there's lots of questions about food security, and this is the guy in the trenches. So Randy, are you there?
I'm here. Thanks, President Tim, and good morning, fellow Rotarians. I'm happy to join this morning and just give a quick overview as to what's happening at Churchill's and a little bit of the grocery industry right now and some of the changes. I'm sure you folks have seen a lot of differences, a lot of changes as you have visited the stores. We've implemented quite a bit as well. Anything from current changes, I'll say, that we're putting up right now are the barriers in between, the hygiene shields are called, between the cashiers and the customers. The social distancing piece is the one that we are looking to really emphasize the most. Keeping customers at least 6 feet away from each other and employees 6 feet away from each other as much as possible. You'll see marks on the floors. As I'm sure you're all aware, Governor DeWine and Director Acton's latest order has essential businesses that are still open. We have to have customer limits or limits for the number of people in the store. At this time, those limits are set by the companies themselves. They have to be posted and enforced, and we're maintaining those. So we've set those at both the stores as well. We ask that people just have some patience as we're all kind of working through this right now. One of the big differences at both of our stores, we can only have every other checkout lane open in order to maintain that social distancing. So that causes some frustration at times, because we also don't want people to stack up at the checkouts, but we want to keep people as far apart as possible. As far as in the industry, some of the things that we're seeing with the supply chain, ordering is getting a lot easier at this point. We are actually getting things in that we're ordering, bigger trucks now. A lot of the limits from our suppliers have been lifted. which has been nice. It's also been one of the advantages for, and I'll put my plug in for the smaller local grocers in the area too. One of the things that we've been able to do, because we're smaller, a little more nimble, is we're able to get supplies from other suppliers. As we all know, the restaurant industry has been hit particularly hard with this pandemic. One of the things that we've been able to do for the last couple weekends is receive large orders of lobsters. So, you know, come get your live or steamed lobster from Churchill's and a few of the other locals that are able to do that. So a little bit of comfort food. So that's the quick piece that I wanted to give out. I certainly want to, any questions that I can help with, I'm certainly happy to try and field them.
So if anybody has any questions, feel free to raise your hand on the right-hand side, or if you want to put it in the chat window, you can do that as well. And we'll do our best to let Kevin do his MC thing and call on y'all.
I see Chuck Stocking.
Yeah, okay. So I just wanted to make a comment. I read a wonderful story about a similar food organization like Churchill's in Hingham, Mass. And it was so inspiring about the important role that that grocery store and the owner, like Walt Churchill, played in raising the sense of community and brotherhood of the people in the community. So I express great gratitude for what you are doing and Walt are doing, and just being there to nurture the human spirit of our community. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chuck. I really appreciate that. And I will say, you know, there's so much focus on the negative things that are happening out there and how the negative impacts that you see around. But I can tell you, our people have been incredible. The folks that are putting in the long hours, that are doing the things above and beyond to try and create a safe environment, and really take care of each other and make sure that we're doing our part to ensure the food supply. So I appreciate that, and always look forward to passing those positive messages back to the rest of our staff.
All right, looks like Kathy Tate has her hand up, so we'll go to Kathy next. Kathy, go ahead.
Yeah, hi Randy, thanks for the update. I'm just wondering, we know that the virus has really impacted the workers in the restaurant industry, and how have you seen the impact on your store in particular, more or less, or is it just a division of the seniors who come in between 7 and I'm not sure what your time is, but I just wonder about how that is impacting your business as well.
Our business, as far as people out, the closure piece, the people out sick, I mean, what part are you asking about, Kathy?
Yeah, I'm just talking about total customer shoppers. Like, is there a downturn, an upswing? You know, business, usually I live nearby, so when I drive by the parking lot, it seems, from my perspective, it's not as full as it used to be. And I just wonder, but maybe other times it is full and I'm just not seeing it. I hope that it is.
No, yeah, that's Kathy. Walt's joined us. It's all of Rotary.
I will.
So, that is true. So what we're seeing now, kind of the cycle of this that we have seen was the initial huge impact, the hoarding phase, as the industry has called it, where we couldn't keep anything in stock in going through everything. What we've moved into now is what we call our new temporary normal. Our customer count overall is down significantly. The average order is also up. So we are seeing people that are cooking more at home, larger orders at home. It's interesting because although we've had huge surges in sales, most of that for the grocery business is our low margin type items, the central store grocery part of that. So now we're working a lot more on making sure that we have the meal items that folks need as we kind of settle into this new temporary normal. So that's a really good observation, and it certainly has held true that our sales have come down certainly from where they were, and a lot less customers in the store, which actually works out well with the social distancing that we need to maintain.
Randy, a couple of questions came in through the chat. Do you see the supply chain catching up to cleaning supply demands? And then also, are you recommending other food safety precautions once the food is purchased and brought home?
Great questions. Okay, so I'm going to tackle both of these. We've had a lot of calls and a lot of conversations with multiple suppliers to understand what's going on with the supply chain. In most situations that we've seen, it is just a supply chain issue in order to get the products through the warehouses and out to the retailers. The manufacturers are saying we have enough product, so just take a deep breath and it'll get out there. One of the examples that we use, our main grocery wholesaler, their warehouse was typically running at about 110% of capacity per week. And right when this began to hit, the order for the Tuesday, right after the initial orders came through, was in excess of 350% of the entire warehouse capacity. So they're used to doing 110% for the week, which is manageable. 350% for one day, it's just not, there's not enough capacity to get it in, break it down, and back out. So the warehouses are starting to catch up. We will see more things in the stores. We do have some disinfectants, and thankfully a lot of the local company, Jaws, one of the local companies that we sell in our stores, we do have those available. The wipes, from everything we're hearing, we're not going to see those in the near future. There is a priority going out for the Clorox wipes, the disinfecting wipes. Those are going to medical and other areas where they're needed more than fulfilling the grocery orders. We will eventually get them in, but we don't have them yet and still can't even order them in. As far as the recommendation for what to do with products as you bring them home, we do suggest that you wipe them down. In particular, wash your produce. The boxes that you get, there's a lot of really good resources out there for what to do when you step out and go out and the things that you bring back home, and wipe them down. I will tell you, at the store level, we are taking every precaution that we can. We have greatly increased our cleaning schedules. We've brought in a third-party cleaning company to come in and sanitize on a nightly basis as well. Thanks for those questions.
Alex Dew wants to know what the price per pound is for that lobster you've got.
They're $11.99 a lobster, and we will steam them for you.
All right, and President Tim has his hand up as well, and so I've saved the best for last. President Tim, back to you.
First question I have is, has Sherrod Brown joined the meeting?
I don't believe yet.
Can you inform me when he does?
Yes, sir.
Because that will we'll make time for him immediately. I want to thank Randy for being here today. I feel like I'm cutting it short because it's such an important question. The one thing I was going to ask is Churchill's doesn't seem to me to be that small a business, but has Randy got any ideas how we could help out our small business community right now?
Well, that's a tough question. So there's a lot going into the small business community right now. Obviously, everything that you can to support local means the world. And even from a grocer, one of the things that we're doing for our staff at least twice a week is we are ordering takeout from local restaurants to help continue to support them and give our folks a little bit of relief in some lunch. So that's just it. Be kind to one another overall is the other piece that we ask for, and to look out for each other, and we will get through this.
Thank you very much. I'm glad that both you and Churchill's are there. It's a great thing for our community. If Sharon Trebek is around, I'm willing to trade for Randy from the Mommy Club to the Toledo Club. I don't think she's there. And
I'm here, Tim.
okay, did you hear what I said about trading?
I did. All about it.
Yeah, well, I'll pick one.
Okay. We also have Justin Glover, who's a employee of or vice president of perishable foods for Walt Churchill's Market, is a member of our club too.
Oh, wow, you're lucky to have them. Okay.
Yes,
we'll
we are.
Talk later. In the meantime, we're waiting for the senator to join us. I just have a few announcements, which I'll cut short if the senator joins us in time. The first is to let everybody know that we have put in place an outreach program to seek out members and perhaps members that we haven't seen for a while and see how they're doing. Everybody's going through all kinds of stuff right now, and we just want to stay in touch, make sure everybody's okay, and that's what that is about. We continue to look for ways to be of service in this time of the virus, and different people can do different things, and nobody wants to become part of the problem, but blood is needed right now very badly in our community, however you want to describe that. And if you're able to, now is a really good time to help replenish the blood stocks in our community. And I just have two other things. One is I want to talk about my neighbor who is not a Rotarian yet. He's a very decent guy. I like him. He's a good neighbor and all that good stuff, but he has a hobby and it's sewing. And he has gone out of his way to sew 60 masks. He happens to work at Sodder's Grocery, which is nearby. And he says he's going to go in and give those employees and Sodders the 60 masks for the employees. He sewed them up, and I presume they're good masks. And that's nice. He's just going to hand them over to the employees. But then he's going to do a different thing. He's going to say to Sodders, by the way, these are your masks. And you decide what you think they're worth. And whatever it is you think they're worth, please give that money to a local church that's got a food bank or is taking care of food for the needy, and we'll call it even. And I think that's a Rotarian. That's, you know, we need a few dues from the guy, but that's a Rotarian. The other thing is a personal, I keep looking at my phone here. I'm expecting a message at any time. It's going to come from the Toledo Hospital, and I'm expecting that I am going to be informed that my very first great-granddaughter is about to be here. I thought she'd be here at 8 o'clock last night, but she's not. And so I wanted to share that good news with everybody here.
Congratulations, Tim.
Thank you very much. I've been trying to negotiate for naming rights with this kid, and it's just not being very successful. I see we've got 10 chats. Who can read the questions? Oh, congratulations. Thank you, everybody.
There was a question that came in from Sheena asking if we're still looking for restaurants to get food for medical staff that fall sick. I don't know if you've heard any updates on that, or if doesn't look like Keith Burwell was on for an update on that. President Tim, you might be able to share with the club, excuse me, just the follow-up conversations that we had with United Way following last week's meeting and some of the updates that you're going to be getting from them.
If you're referring to providing money to United Way's emergency fund, I don't feel comfortable doing that, other than you've made it clear that we're doing something to get some money into the most neediest of our members, but I still have to get approval from the full board.
Yeah, so that was not what I was referring to.
What were you referring to?
So Wendy Peaster had said she was going to provide 211 data updates to you to share with the club, and I think we're expecting our first one to come this Wednesday, I believe.
Okay, we've just given Kathy a heart attack. Because you said United Way and I heard Toledo Community Foundation, but we'll sort that out next week. And I don't have anything new regarding the 211. Do you or anybody amongst us?
If anybody has any info, just raise your hand and we'll call on you or put it in the chat message for us.
Hey, Sharon, Sharon Trevick, do you want to tell us what you've been doing at the Mommy Club with your Zoom membership or Zoom meetings?
I will. Thanks, Tim. So we are having our weekly meetings at noon on Wednesdays, and like you, we've been asking our members to talk about how it's impacting their business. Todd Kramer, who's the superintendent of Maumee City Schools, spoke last week, and he actually he was double booked, so he had to trying to get my TV down, sorry. He had to record a video, but it was interesting to get his perspective from the school standpoint. We also heard from Justin, who talked a little bit about Churchill's, what they were doing. We've talked to a few of our people who are in the finance industry, and Robin Cyrick and I have been sharing updates from the CPA firms in the area about how we're helping our clients with the CARES Act and the payroll protection program. So those meetings have been good. We also are looking to make a donation of about between $8,000 and $10,000 to the Maumee Senior Center. They are still open and still providing food for Maumee senior residents. It's about $4,000 a week, that cost. So we're trying to do what we can do to help them.
Sharon, let's have some more conversations about getting some great speakers together and maybe some joint meetings. In the meantime, I've got to turn the meeting over to Bob Savage, I think, who's going to introduce our speaker. Is Bob Savage?
Actually, I didn't know I was in. Need one or steal any of Kevin's thunder here. So we're certainly glad to have Sherrod Brown with us today, and a long-time senator for the state of Ohio. Hails from Northeast Ohio. I won't cut into his time. Obviously, pretty critical times. Not that there isn't usually lots going on, but a lot more going on now. So with that, Senator, I believe, turn the floor over to you, or the microphone back to Kevin.
Thank you. Bob Savage, thank you again. Tim, thanks for your leadership in this. Sharon, I enjoyed hearing your comments. Thank you for what this club's doing with feeding seniors, and thanks for what the Rotary, which I know you've done on Lake Erie, on lead abatement, on a whole host of issues that matter so much to particularly early childhood education, what this Rotary Club's done. I want to, in this awful time for our country, this pandemic, I want to do a shout out to Rotary International for years ago, I worked on international tuberculosis control issues, and I was in Geneva at the World Health Assembly, and it looked like a United Nations meeting with all the various countries there with a little cardboard cut out, the little tent, it said United Kingdom, Nigeria, France, United States, whatever. In the back of the room, there were 4 or 5 entities that had what was called observer status. It was Vatican, the Red Cross, the couple of others, and then it was Rotary International, because of the work that this club has done internationally in eradication of polio. And one of the great victories of our time, I'm old enough, and Bob Savage is old enough, and Sharon's not, but Tim might be, to have remembered what it was like to have our parents fear polio. And I went to school, I remember, with a couple of kids that clearly had a bit of a disability from polio. And what we've done as a nation and as a world in public health speak so much of that. So thank you all for that. I wore a coat and tie for the first time in 2 weeks working from home because I was speaking to the Rotary, damn it, and nobody else is dressed up. So, oh well, I won't make that mistake again. Let me just talk about what's going on, and I will leave certainly time for questions if that's in the format, and Bob told us it was. I want to recognize several people from my office are tuned in. Everybody in my office, both the Northwest Ohio group and Cleveland and Columbus and Cincinnati and Washington, is working from home. Ann Longsworth-Orr and Erica, Erica's most recently joined us, are working from home too, and they are part of this meeting too. And then Jeremy, who is our legislative director, and he was, as I was doing negotiations on the last coronavirus #3 package, I was about a dozen senators were involved in the negotiations. Jeremy was helping to lead those negotiations on the staff level, so he knows more about this, what has been in this bill and what kinds of things we did and what kinds of things we either failed to do or left out that we can help with. And part of the questions I'd like, and I'm doing a lot of, sorry, I'm kind of drifting here. I'm doing a lot of roundtable discussions and conference calls. I just think the best way to do my job is to sit with 15 or 20 people and listen to them. I do fewer big town halls probably than my colleagues, but I do a lot of 15 or 20 people roundtables, and I'm continuing that. It's where I get ideas for sort of the next coronavirus package that we look to be doing. There are two things. I just was with Governor DeWine this morning on the phone, and I spoke today also with the Director of the Department of Health, Amy Acton, and both of them well from this. They've both served this state beyond admirably. They have, I say to Mike that he has saved the lives, he and Amy Acton have saved countless numbers of lives in Ohio, and I also think because of the lack of leadership at the White House that it's costing American lives. While Mike has been engaged in this, making tough decisions when only a few people were diagnosed in Ohio. I mean, I remember he closed the schools. He shut down the Arnold in Columbus and closed the schools when there were only single-digit number of people who were diagnosed, and way ahead of others, and way ahead of the president, and a good bit ahead of a lot of governors of both parties. And I respect him for that. During that period, the president was still denying this was a public health crisis, and we've got to make up for lost time. And there are two things especially that we need to do. One is about personal protective equipment. We are weeks behind scaling up what we need to do. And the other is testing. And when I've looked at other countries around the world, there have been a handful of countries only that have done this right. South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, and Germany. I would say the countries that have done it right. They did intense testing. Then after they tested anybody that was tested positive, they quarantined them. Then they hired a bunch of people who were traced. They called them contact tracers, people that would figure out, would interview the person who was sick, who had been diagnosed positively, and would say, whom have you talked to in the last 12 days or 15 days? They would contact them, and then they would be quarantined in a college dorm or a hotel or somewhere for a period of time. That's the only way. Otherwise, we talk about flattening the curve. You talk to public health officials, including Dr. Acton, or you talk to Dr. Fauci, or you talk to a number of them. Flattening the curve doesn't get our economy back up again. It really needs to bring the numbers down, and that's the way we need to do that. And that's the concern that I have with the way it's doing it, and the concern. The concern I know that Governor DeWine has about this. But let me talk for a moment about what we need to do with the Defense Production Act. I wrote a letter to the president maybe 3 weeks ago saying, please invoke this 70-year-old law that was passed and signed by Harry Truman, passed by a Republican Congress with Harry Truman as the president. And the purpose of the Defense Production Act was so to give the president extraordinary powers, in large part to deal with the Soviet Union and the newly formed People's Republic of China. It was 1950. Mao had just taken over in 49. We know of Stalin, obviously, and their quest for world domination. And it meant that the president needed extraordinary powers, as you can read in the Eric Larson new book, how both in Britain and the US, they turned domestic manufacturers of cars and trucks and other equipment into defense manufacturers. So that was the reason for the law. We're asking the president to use it, especially on personal protective equipment. We're asking it to use it on testing. There are places in Ohio where they can test. The Cleveland Clinic's doing about 500 a day. Ohio State's doing several hundred a day. I've spoken with Randy Ostra at ProMedica. There are efforts to do this, but they simply don't have enough supplies. They don't have enough cotton swabs. They don't have enough other kinds of reagents and all to do this testing on the scale we need to do the testing. And that means nationally, maybe as many as 1 million a day, when so far we've only done about 1.5 million in the aggregate over the last 2 months. So we're way behind in large part because the federal government didn't recognize this early enough, as a lot of us were advising the White House and the governors like Mike DeWine were doing things. So let me give you the best example. A lot of you are business people, and a lot of you understand this well. There's a manufacturer in Cleveland, 700 workers. They make Q-tips. I believe they're the only Q-tip manufacturer in the United States. I believe, I'm not sure of that, but they make a huge number of Q-tips, both brand name and off-brand. I worked with, his name's Andy Warlick, the CEO of this company. The company's located out, is in North Carolina, and I've talked to him repeatedly. I organized a call of textile manufacturers about 3 weeks ago. About 50 companies were on, just saying, how can we help you transition, tool up, and to retool to make something that helps us with testing and helps us with personal protective equipment. And he talked about his Q-tip manufacturing, and he said he thinks he could retool from Q-tips to cotton swabs. Cotton swabs overwhelmingly are made overseas. I assume China, I don't know that, but overseas. So here's the challenge, and here's why only the White House can do this. And the White House needs one person in charge to do this. So he needs capital to retool. He's not looking to make money from this. He's looking to break even and keep his workers employed. But he needs capital to retool. Then he needs a commitment from the White House of a commitment and a promise, a written promise of sales, a certain amount of sales. And then at the end, when this is over, he needs an exit strategy. If he just goes, after he's done this retooling, he probably can't make cotton swabs 8 months, 10 months, a year from now, unless there are government orders, because China can undercut his price. So he needs that kind of retooling. He needs that kind of commitment from the government. Money for retooling, that's a kind of commitment from the government. And then he needs an exit strategy at the end. And that's what we face. That's why I've asked the president, and I know Governor DeWine has, and I know governors around the country have, saying we need one person in charge at the White House that can make these decisions and can scale up the Defense Production Act. Otherwise, the best we're going to do is flatten the curve instead of bringing these numbers down. And we can't get people back to work in the large numbers that we all want to go back to work without that commitment from the White House, because having a flattened curve simply won't do it. We're treading water or worse. We haven't seen yet in Ohio. I mean, I assume you're feeling it in Toledo because Detroit is experiencing such a difficult time. I assume largely because of the size of their airport and the number of flights that Old Northwest had directly to China and Japan and that part of the world. I make that assumption. I don't know. But I know that what's happening in Detroit is likely going to come to other places, including Warren, Ohio. And I say that Governor DeWine has, without a doubt, his boldness has saved lives, and I applaud him for that. And we've got to figure this out beyond, to do testing, then to do the right kind of contact tracing, and then quarantining and isolating people to turn these numbers around. Then I'll just close with this, telling you what was in the last package. The third package we did was a good bipartisan effort. In the end, everybody voted for it in the Senate, and the House did a sort of truncated vote. They didn't bring everybody back, and they shouldn't have for it. We $1,200 to everybody making pretty much under $100,000. We found some ways to get. I talked to Ben Bernanke today, the former chair of the Fed, to get his views on how we should be doing this. especially helping small business. There was a big component in here working with the Treasury Secretary and the Small Business Administration and the Federal Reserve. We scaled up unemployment benefits. No matter what you get in Ohio, you get $600 federal dollars a week too for unemployment. And that hits especially those workers that may not qualify for unemployment. If you have workers in your businesses, or if you have friends, or if any of you are in this situation, if you're a gig worker, or you're self-employed, or you're a part-time worker, you may not be eligible for Ohio unemployment, but you still should file because you'll get the $600 federal. So we wanted to include everybody that lost their jobs because of, for obvious reasons that people can exist as well as possible in the weeks ahead. We had a moratorium as far as it could go on foreclosures and evictions. I spoke with the head of Huntington last night. I spoke with a group of Ohio bankers, about 50 of them on the call. Most of them are patiently trying to keep people from being evicted and not foreclosing or giving forbearance of mortgages. All the things we do there, that can't last forever. So we need a lot of help there. We also put a lot of money into hospitals and into local and state governments. We will have to do more of that. When I talked to former Chair Bernanke yesterday, when I talked to Jay Powell, the Chair of the Federal Reserve last week, they all recognize more dollars have to go to state and local governments just so they can continue doing the basic services they need to do, from transit to feeding people to Meals on Wheels, all of that. And that will, I assume, also be part of the next package. I think that's where one last thing. I am suggesting working with a couple senators on something we're calling pandemic pay. Those people, not just that work in hospitals at ProMedica or work at the Bellevue Hospital or work as doctors or nurses or nurses' aides, but there are, a lot of us, as I can see from many of you, are working from home and have that privilege of working from home. Some of you are unemployed at home, unfortunately, but we want to take care of you that way. But a whole lot of people are in the workforce, and those people that are out and about, they are stocking grocery store shelves. They work at CVS. They're delivery drivers. They're transit drivers, bus drivers. There are a whole lot of people that are exposed every day. My wife and I are home. We only walk our dogs. We don't leave the house except for that. We're lucky enough to have food delivered from a grocery store. But a whole lot of people are out working, doing things, and we need to help them and understand their risk with some sort of pandemic pay. Again, not just the healthcare workers directly, who are perhaps the most heroic and the most at risk, but with others too that are exposed to this invisible enemy that don't really entirely know how to protect ourselves. I mean, they're all following very important instructions from the president and others, and washing their hands and keeping social distance. But for a lot of people, that ain't so easy. So let me stop there. And I talked a little longer than I planned, but I wanted to relay the conversations in the last few days with Bernanke and with the governor and with Dr. Act. So thank you all.
Senator Brown, thank you very much. We're going to open up to questions from members of the club. We'll start with Phil Marissy. Phil, you are unmuted. Go ahead.
Senator, thank you for your time today. Comment and a question. The comment is that in Northwest Ohio, the University of Toledo Medical Center is doing COVID-19 testing. We were the first to have it, and we're proud of that capability, and it's because of NIH funding that has been available to that hospital. We are part of a coalition that's working to keep that hospital running and the campus intact there, and there'll be more on that to come. My question—
Could I ask you a little more before you start? Tell me, how long has UT been doing this and actually doing this?
They got go live, I believe, a week ago today. And they had their testing vetted. It took a 10-day process to have the testing vetted, and I can't speak specifically to the groups that did the vetting, but they had go live within 10 days, which is extraordinary for a hospital of that size. And it's the only hospital in Northwest Ohio that does NIH research.
Are they able to do that? Are they able, how many are they able to test a day? You know?
I believe they're doing 80 to 90 a day, and they're turning it around in 8 hours. Now, I can't speak to that, but I can't be specific on that, but I do believe that's the last number I heard.
And you work at the hospital?
No, sir. I'm part of a coalition that's trying to keep the hospital running.
Okay.
I'm a public information person.
Well, thank you. But
Yeah,
I think probably the reason they're 80 to 100 is they can't get more reagents and can't get enough cotton swabs. I mean,
You're on my mailing list. You're on the mailing list for this group, and I don't want to belabor this point. I just wanted to make that comment.
no, I really.
My question, Senator, is, you know, let's assume the best is going to happen and the economy is going to rebound. How will we possibly accommodate demand for workers, supplies, labor, etc.? Maybe this is, you know, really just going to not go away, but we're going to get better soon, and people are going to be rejoining the workforce in droves, and there'll be a demand for supply and all that. What are stockpiles like? What is acquisition like? What is the supply chain like? How do we deal with that?
That's the million-dollar question, Mr. Mercy, and nobody can say for sure what the answer to that question is. Here are just some general thoughts. I'll try to be brief, unlike what I was before. So, you know, the way we structure, the way we tried to do, whether it was the airlines or small business or companies of all sizes, and what we wanted to do with individuals is keep as many businesses alive as possible. And keep those businesses alive with as much of their workforce as they could. And for the workforce that they couldn't keep because they had little or no revenue, that those workers got as close to the pay they were getting as possible. That's why the additional $600. Some workers, the $600 will bring them up, on the average it'll bring them up to about the pay they had if their state unemployment system works generally well. And some state unemployment systems are generous and some are the opposite of that. So that had to be a national average. We just couldn't figure out that quickly in a week how to write a formula that would not slow everything down. I mean, part of this is you got to get the money out the door to people. We did the $1,200 understanding that can keep people in their homes for a bit of time, but doesn't go very far. We may take that up again. The whole point of this, Mr. Marcy, was to try to, when this is done, when the virus is mostly in the rearview mirror and we can't actually go back to work, that companies would be ready right then to scale up, that demand might be pent up for some products so that people would buy, and that incomes won't have dropped so precipitously over the 3-4 months that the economy is imploded, that people couldn't come back with what they needed. It does mean that, I mean, when I hear people talking about going to stadiums and rock concerts again anytime soon, I mean, I can't imagine the Mud Hens. I've gone to a lot of Mud Hen games over the years, the old stadium, the new stadium. I understand that I just can't imagine lots of people wanting to go to a sports event when this, to things with large numbers of people. So I would assume we don't rush back into that. As much as I miss the baseball season and a lot of you miss University of Toledo football, whatever is going to happen, it's pretty impossible to predict. But I got to think that the economy, we really are dependent on those smaller business and the big ones like the airlines being ready. I just think that the biggest problem to me, and what Bernanke, when I called Bernanke today, what he kept, when I'd ask him questions, his answer every time, when I stick to mostly economic questions, because he was chair of the Federal Reserve in the last awful time, 12 years ago, his answer always came back, you gotta fix healthcare first because the economy can never come back. And this whole idea of the cure is worse than the disease is, however that is said, is just wrongheaded. I mean, if we can't get people so that if we can't allay their fears and start this trajectory down, not just flat, it's going to be damn hard for anybody to want to work and to want to go back and to expose themselves, and we'll never see the vibrancy of this economy return until we fix that. So that's why this next package, this next package, a huge part of it has to be public health. It has to be invoking the Defense Production Act. So even though it's going to be expensive to retool companies to make what we need to make, from face masks to gloves to ventilators to respirators, and also the testing equipment. If we can't do that and then put real money into the tracers and the contact tracers, and one little point of optimism, when I talked to Amy Acton today, she's one of these public health people have to be this way. She thinks about 3 steps ahead. And that's why it's so smart that DeWine listened to her, because she's really good. And she has said they're already looking at medicals. They're already starting to reach out and hire medical students and others to be the contact tracers. They can start to train them. So once we get to the position where we have figured out the testing, and it's got to be every day we wait is damaging. Bernanke told me every month we make is $1 trillion+ of economic damage. So that's why immediacy on urgency in fixing the healthcare system is paramount to everything else. Thanks for the thoughtful questions, Mercy.
Senator Brown, thank you very much. Now I'm going to go to Wes Grudgian with a question. Wes, I think you're unmuted. Go ahead.
I am, thanks. First of all, thanks for speaking with us today, Senator Brown. So we work with manufacturers here in Ohio, some that you're talking about that are in the process of retooling. One in particular has successfully retooled and actually has already produced tens of thousands of face shields. But we've sort of had trouble getting through to anyone at ODH to talk about this or to get those supplies to the necessary folks. Who do you suggest that companies like that, or what sort of resources, where do those companies reach out to start that conversation?
You should reach out to us. I mean, I talk to the governor regularly. I talk to the health director regularly, Wes, and let us know. I'm trying to connect people all the time with either the White House to get this DPA going, defense production, or specifically if you have a company or a company that can make that has these products that they sorely need. So if you would if Erica or Ann on this call both live in Northwest Ohio, would get in touch with you, or you in touch with them, and feed it to us, and we will make sure it gets to the right place. Thank you.
I'll send her a message, absolutely.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Bridget. Thanks.
All right, and I can help connect you guys by email as well, or just connect through the chat within this meeting. How beautiful is that? It's just like a real meeting. All right, Mark Arudia. I failed at this last week, but we're going to try and get it right this week. Mark, go ahead.
You are unmuted by host, is that correct? Awesome. Yes, Senator, I had a question. I work with very small business clients, and I've been talking with them about the self-employed uninsured, the $600, versus some of the other programs like the BIDL and the PPP. Are people able to leverage multiple programs like those that I mentioned, or would one exclude them from another, to your knowledge?
I can't speak 100% certain here. I'm on, but work with our office on this if there are questions. And Jeremy on this call from my legislative director may know the answer, but I'm almost certain you can file for unemployment as a self-employed person, or if you've been laid off or your hours have been cut. And you may or may not be eligible for state, but you are eligible for the 600. Then if you want to join, if you want to get in the PPP program, or you want to get in the SBA program, there's simply no reason you shouldn't be able to. Those are very different track. One shouldn't cancel out the other. The one is to stay alive. The other one is to keep your business alive. So I would be almost certain there would not be, no take away from one in order to do the other. But work with our office and make sure of that.
And I did have one other question relative to the $1,200, $2,400 to taxpayers. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that college student workers that are dependents don't qualify for the 500 or the 1200. Is that correct?
We have wrestled with that. I don't think, I don't know for sure. I think there's a hole there that the reason I'm struggling with the answer, I confronted this with some veteran students, some University of Akron students who are veterans, and they worked in a program there. We think that we took care of them, but that's a small number of students. And I don't know if the age makes a difference. Maybe Jeremy, are you on the call and can answer that, or do you know the answer to that? If you are on the call, if not, we'll find a way, because I don't know. If it weren't taken care of, it needs to be in the next one. So I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. A lot of questions. Thanks so much.
This was done in about 10 days, this bill.
Right.
So anyway, thanks.
All right, and if Jeremy's done, I don't see his name on here, but it might be a username or something that I'm missing. So send me a message and we can connect you to help me answer that question as well. Next, we'll go to Doug Neckers, maybe. Try to unmute Doug. That's all right. Doug, go ahead.
All right. Thank you very much, Senator Brown, for joining us today. This has been very informative. I started the Center for Photochemical Sciences at Bowling Green State University, and our business, Spectrophotopolymers, is making thousands of swabs a day using 3D printing, just for the information of the group.
Wow.
But I have a question for you, and that is, I think that what happened with this pandemic and has happened in other ways over the last decade or so, is that we've become complacent about support for science in the United States. The editor of Science, Holden Thorpe, the magazine, has had several editorials recently about that. And the most recent thing that happened that was totally ridiculous was Peter Navarro arguing with Tony Fauci about the validity of chloroquine as a treatment for COVID-19. Have you any thoughts about how we gear up our scientific resources as we take out of this pandemic, which caught the entire nation by surprise and totally devastated a whole bunch of things, lives and our economy?
Yeah, sure. I think it didn't catch the whole nation by surprise. I mean, we've seen that the White House had an office that's job was to look to search the world, to surveil the world for potential epidemics that could become, community epidemics that become world pandemics. We had a group of scientists that worked in labs around the country. That program just died last year. There are within the White House, and there have been this White Houses of at least the last three, Bush Jr., Obama, and Trump, exercises, if you will, like military exercises on not directly in-person exercises, but what do you do if there's an attack, a terrorist attack? What do you do if there's a pandemic? And none of those things were listened to, frankly. So, and we have a government now that, and this, I don't mean to sound partisan here, but there is one political party in this country that denies climate change, that just simply says they are climate deniers. I mean, that's the official position of the president and the Republican Party in this country. There are exceptions, but they aren't the ones in charge. And so, and just that the president of the United States would, I apologize for Trump voters in this audience that still think he's the greatest, but president of the United States yesterday, and I watch all of these news conferences. I watch pretty much the entirety of each of them. He plays doctor too much. He's talking about a drug that he says, what do you got to lose? Well, I listen to Dr. Acton. I listen to Mike DeWine because he listens to Dr. Acton. I mean, I listen to Dr. Fauci. I listen to Dr. Birx. I listen to Dr. Jim Yong Kim of Partners in Health. I talk to these people all the time. They know more than I do. Of course they do. And so until voters recognize a couple of things. One, that character and experience matters. Look at Mike DeWine. I mean, some of you know Mike DeWine and I have not always been political allies. I ran against him for the Senate in 2006. We work very well together now. But he understands that you think about what his experience in his character, how he's led during this, and then contrast that to other places. And we've got to recognize as a country, do we care about science? And voters have to, I don't mean to lecture or preach, but we don't solve, science isn't everything, but science has a whole lot to do with understanding and combating climate change, and science has a whole lot to do with this pandemic. And so far, Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx's protestations notwithstanding, the federal policy out of the White House is not following science like the state policy out of Ohio and the Republican governors in Massachusetts and Maryland and the Democratic governor in New York, who listen to their doctors, listen to their medical professions, and understand the importance of science. So that's where I think what I think we need to do.
And therein lies my question. How do we get around this ignorance?
Well, we educate each other better. I spent the morning talking, my conversations with the governor and the health department director was exactly that. How do we get around that? So we see an effort to scale up on the short term with the pandemic, the most important thing of our generation now, clearly, how we scale up testing and how we scale up this whole way of combating this, the way Germany has done it pretty well, not perfectly in any of these places, Germany and Taiwan and South Korea and Singapore. But I wish I knew the specific compelling answer to your question better than I do.
Senator, I'm told that you are going to leave us at the half hour in 3 minutes by hook or by crook.
Yeah, I can go on an extra 7 or 8 if you want, but unless the technology shuts down, I have no idea.
Okay.
Well, if you've got the time, there's still a few more questions. I also was able to connect to Jeremy as well. He's on the call and said he can stick around a little bit after to answer any additional questions that folks may have. But let's go real quickly to Kurt Church, who's got a question for you. Kurt, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Thank you for being here, Senator, and speaking to our club today. My question is fairly quick. I know that we've, from a small business perspective, have been discussing in your financing packages coming out of the federal government to keep people on staff. Has Congress started looking at ways to ensure access to capital after this is over so that they can start gearing up and getting back to a normal situation for them as a business, so we don't lose all these small businesses as it relates to the current economic situation, so they can get back on their feet, not just keeping people on staff, but growing again? Thank you.
That's a hard question, Mr. Church. You said it's a short question, but it's a hard question. I mean, that's the intent here with making sure that people's buying power doesn't drop 50% or close to zero at the time this gets fit, at the time we can start going back to work. I mean, we need to make sure the banks stay healthy. I've questioned, I talked to Bernanke and to Jay Powell, and most experts agree with me on this. The chairman of the Federal Reserve doesn't right now, and that's the way it is, that banks need to sort of hold onto their capital now. Maybe they can give their dividends this quarter to in stock, but they shouldn't be paying out money because the banks need to keep more capital, because even with the stress tests that happened over the last year, the banks are required under Dodd-Frank to do stress testing. And stress testing are what would happen to this bank in the banking sector if the economy went to hell. Well, the worst case scenario with stress testing is about where we are now. So I just think banks need to be cautious so that we don't have to bail them out 6 months or 8 months or 10 months from now if we can't do what you suggest. So, I mean, it's all of that. It's keeping the financial sector strong enough, understand they're hurting too. It's making sure people can stay in their homes. It's making sure people's buying power doesn't plummet. And it's making sure these businesses can stay alive and keep their employees nearby. If you run a restaurant and your employees are drawing unemployment, so that they can at least keep going, when you start your restaurant again, those employees, many of them would want to come back. You wouldn't have to retrain and start over. I also understand, it was explained to me by a banker last night, that restaurants that are going to restart are going to have to reconfigure that people are not sitting as close together as they were, cutting into the revenues of the restaurant. If people are going to, I mean, all these complicated things that frankly, I don't think about until I hear somebody in meetings like this tell me about them. And that's the challenge. So I don't think anybody knows, but I think we need to, especially with the next package, be thinking, what does this look like 3 months, 6 months from now? Thanks, Mr. Church.
All right, we're going to go to Chris Anderson with the next question. Chris, you are unmuted. Go ahead.
Hi, Senator. Thanks. My question is, we're 6 months, a little bit over 6 months away from a election. I'm just curious, are there any conversations going on about contingencies if this continues, different ways to approach it going forward?
Yeah, there are. There are conversations all the time. What do? We put $400 million in this last package to prepare for that. But a lot of us are thinking we are going to need to do a mail-in election. You know, the Ohio legislature and Governor DeWine decided when they moved the Ohio primary back, and I think the governor made the right decision. I think he had no choice when he saw the number of poll workers, most of whom are closer to my age than they are my kids' age. Number of poll workers that just decided they weren't going to work the polls, and they made the right personal health decision when they said that, I think. And I think people wouldn't have turned out as much. So they have decided, the legislature, to make this this primary now entirely mail-in, or vote early, which you could do at the Lucas County or Wood County or Fulton County or Ottawa County Board of Elections. So what I'm hoping we end up with, although the president has opposed this, and he has opposed, and most Republicans have opposed it, is that we allow that this election be mail-in for anybody that wants to vote by mail, or early voting for a month before the election, the way we also have now. Give people that option.
Let me refine my question. Campaigning and the pressure of campaigning, it's the 6 months and all the energy and just how will people campaign in this environment?
Yeah, well, it's I don't think that's really the government's call here, but I also think that you're not going to see big rallies. I mean, I've been to a lot of big rallies in Toledo for presidential candidates, and I think there will probably be some rallies at the end, but I don't know. I would not be at all surprised at the political conventions. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not predicting it. Who knows? That the political conventions will be canceled, or will be done some Skyping, remote Zoom sort of Facebook way. I think everything in this calendar year is just upside down, is different. I think professional sports, I could see college football teams playing their schedule, but not playing in front of crowds. I can see a lot of things like this, because I don't know how fast, the question, the earlier question from Mr. Church about getting businesses up and running, there are various kinds of businesses that will go back to work pretty quickly, relatively, once we combat this, effectively put this in the rearview mirror. But the big kinds of events, whether it's a big political events or whether it's a Detroit Lions game, I would think would be a different category. So I don't think we have any idea how people are going to campaign. I know that the presumptive Democratic nominee, Joe Biden, his people are struggling. What do you do here? I know Trump really misses those big rallies. I don't know that he'll do any more of those. I don't know. I think that they've got to be careful and not put people at risk.
Is there any conversation about delaying it, just like they're talking about playing football in the spring? Is there any conversation about delaying it?
I don't think the public particularly cares that Joe Biden or Donald Trump can't do a big rally at Mud Hen Stadium. I don't think that's the issue. Is the election. Our Constitution says when the election is, and nobody should dare try to move that. There's a way of voting safely. They're just a different way of campaigning. I mean, campaigning when you were a kid, Mr. Anderson, campaigning was a lot different from now. There weren't as many big rallies. A lot of things were different. So it's going to be different, at least in 2020, if not beyond. And I don't think we don't exactly, the way we run our campaigns is not exactly an edifying sort of spectacle. So, but the bad news is you're still going to see a lot of awful television ads. Count on that. Thanks for the thoughtful question.
Senator, I need to remind you of time. We like having you here, and we still have questions.
I'll do one more question for sure. Thanks.
How about if you do 2 quick ones?
Okay, I can't do quick, but I'll do my best. Okay. Sure.
Abby, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey,
Hear me?
I can, yeah.
Okay. Hi, Senator. It's Abby Mortimer. I have a quick question about testing. Just because I had a personal experience yesterday with a family member in her 70s, and we talked to, she went through the screening and ProMedica and all of that, and was screened out 3 times and just told to stay home because basically they were only testing medical personnel. So, and my nurse friends were saying that to me because I'm like, how do I get her tested? She had every single symptom. So it was a little, I'm just wondering, when are we going to have enough tests where we're not just testing medical personnel? It was scary. I had to get on the phone about 2 to 3 people, and finally we got her into a clinic here because an urgent care is doing testing here. So the doctor that runs it let me know and said, call, screen her, get her in, and she did get tested. So I think it's great. We just had a hard time.
Well, that Ms. Mortimer, that underscores the problem. I mean, we need people like that. There should be no question. If you have symptoms, if you're a healthcare worker, if you're going to be exposed to people, you should be tested. But when we've only tested, I believe that the aggregate number since our federal government, since the president personally found out about this pandemic in January, from that day to now, I think there have been 1.2 million tests in this whole country, and that's pathetic, frankly. And we need, again, public health authorities say we probably need to do 1 million a day. So UT's work can scale up if they had the reagents and if they had the cotton swabs and all they need. So can Cleveland Clinic doing it, University Hospital, Ohio State, and some University of Cincinnati, Toledo, so many others. But we've got to have a national. I mean, this is a national crisis to scale up testing, and your family situation is exactly the human face of that. So thanks for bearing with it and loving her and insisting it happen. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ms. Warmer.
Senator, I just have one more person before we wrap this up. Is Keith Hodkinson there, our district governor-elect?
I am here.
Did you have anything to say?
And where are you from, Keith?
Tiffin, Ohio.
Tiffin, Ohio. Calvert or Columbia? Where'd you go?
Actually, I'm from the east side of the Detroit area is where I'm originally from.
Welcome to God's country in Seneca County.
I've lived here for 38 years and love it. We'll never go back.
Cool.
No, I don't have any specific questions to the senator. However, we as a district are tackling with our youth exchange program and what to do.
Yeah.
We have a number of students inbound and outbound across the world, and we are getting them back, and we're sending those students back to their homes. And the question is, we're going to look at this for this next year. And the question is, do we just take a year off at least and let things settle down? Because what parent is going to want to send their child to some place that they're not sure what's going to be happening in 3 months or 4 months as they go into school?
So you have to make these decisions by the summer, in the summer, right?
Right. We are in the process right now of trying to determine whether we even have a youth exchange program at all for the next year.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you should cancel it. I think that's more the governor's role, but I think it sort of takes care of itself because you're not going to get parents that want to do this, I would think. But I just think the advantage of youth exchange is so life-changing for the the kids that came to my high school in Mansfield that were foreign exchange students, and I got to learn a little about their culture, and certainly the kids that got to go overseas. So that's great. Rotary does it. I've been talking to a lot of university presidents too in Ohio, and they don't, not so much about this, but they just don't know. Our parents go, what are kids going to do next fall? Are they going to want to enroll? Are their parents going to be reluctant, so I think you deal with all those. But I can't imagine you can keep that going through the fall. But I don't know for sure. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Keith, for your work with Rotary.
Thanks, Keith. Senator, I know that you have to go, and I'm going to take care of that right now. I should tell you that looking at my computer on Zoom, you have now spoken to 146 Rotarians on Zoom. And I don't know what that number will be on Facebook, but if it matches what we did last week, I suspect we're up to around 400 people, but I don't know. So
I appreciate it. No, and I thought the seriousness and gravitas of the questions were really impressive. So thank you. The Rotary always is a cut above, but Zooming or whatever we're doing in Rotary is really a cut above. Facebook, whatever we're doing now. So Zooming. So thank you for arranging it this way, Tim, and all of you, and making this work. So Kevin and all. So thank you so much for having me. We'll do it in person sometime soon.
Just that normally we would give you a book to thank you for about the historic tales of Toledo. You're not getting that.
Okay. I can live without it, but I'll get it at some point, I hope.
Well,
all right.
Who knows? But what we will do is make a contribution in your name to Rotary's Polio Plus Fund, and through that, you're going to save a few lives. So
can you, since I mentioned polio at the beginning, can you double the contribution? But don't take it out. Don't take it out of Sharon's money that goes to feed seniors and mommies. So that's all I got to say.
Well, I'll tell you, I will personally match that contribution.
Oh, right, Tim. Thank you. You're not the Congressman Tim Ryan, I assume, from the look on your face.
He's my ugly younger brother.
Okay, I got it.
I didn't have much imagination.
Well, thank you all. This was a fun hour. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Senator. Can we do this? Can you hear that? The applause?
Really, you hear it, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. You're free to join us if you can. Or stay with us if you can. You make us laugh today.
Well, you never know. For some couples, the ongoing self-quarantine can occasionally push the limits of togetherness. My wife yelled from upstairs, asking, "Do you ever get a shooting pain across your body like someone's got a voodoo doll of you and they're sticking pins in it?" Sounding concerned, I said no. She responded, "How about now?" A Roman walks into a bar and orders 5 beers, please. Okay, well, and finally, a bartender is sitting behind his bar when a well-dressed but obviously intoxicated man stumbles in. "Bartender, a drink for everyone, a drink for me, and a drink for yourself." The bartender pours all the drinks. The whole bar cheers, and they all drink. The bartender hands the bill to the man, and he just shrugs and says, "Oh, I didn't bring my wallet tonight, sorry." The bartender proceeds to beat the living daylights out of the man and throws him out of the bar. The next day, the bartender is again behind his bar when the same well-dressed but intoxicated man stumbles in. "Bartender, a drink for everyone, a drink for me, and a drink for yourself." The bartender thinks, "This guy can't be that stupid. He probably came to settle up. Now I'm feeling bad for beating him so hard the previous night." So he pours all the drinks, the whole bar cheers, they all drink. The bartender hands the bill to the man, and he once again shrugs and says, "Oh, I didn't bring my wallet again, sorry." The bartender proceeds to beat the man even harder and kicks him out. The third night in a row, the bartender just can't believe his eyes when he sees the man return. "Bartender, a drink for everyone and a drink for me." The bartender is fuming and bellows, "What, no drink for me tonight?" The drunk looks at him and says, "Nah, man, you're way too mean when you drink."
Okay, thank you very much, Chuck. And with that, the meeting is adjourned.